Hi, I'm very excited to do the first video of a 6-part series on how to manage bipolar disorder. So we're going to try and discuss what is bipolar disorder today. I'm a firm believer that it is impossible to win a war against anything without knowing what it is that you're fighting against. And so we're going to do that in 3 ways today. Firstly, we'll be discussing the diagnostic criteria for bipolar and the different types of episodes. Then we'll be discussing the early symptoms and the triggers that often influence people to go into episode. And then we will finish off by discussing how to do mood graphs and the importance of documenting your mood in mood graphs in understanding your own experience of bipolar disorder. So first off, the diagnostic criteria. So the DSM-5 is normally the tool used mainly in America but also across the world for diagnosing mental disorders. So you have a number of different types of episodes within bipolar disorder, but the most typical type of episode is a manic episode. Manic episodes are distinct periods of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive or irritable mood that last for at least 1 week and are present almost all the time during that period. But essentially what this includes is grandiosity, extremely high self-esteem, a decreased need for sleep, being really talkative, talking faster than usual, having flights of ideas and racing thoughts, being highly distractible, an increase in goal-directed activity, excessive involvement in activities that could lead to risk or harm to themselves or others, and psychomotor agitation, so constantly feeling the need to move. So these are just generally a list of the symptoms that are in mania, and how that often manifests is people, maybe sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night, essentially, believing, oh, I'm going to take over the world. Oh, this song that I'm listening to, like, maybe Eminem is personally trying to talk to me through a song. I mentioned that because, I can relate very much to that within my own experience of bipolar disorder. And essentially, it's just an elated mood which has a drastic negative effect on generally social relationships in terms of occupational functioning, etc. So you have 2 different types of mania. You've got full-blown mania and hypermania. And the main difference between the 2 is that hypermania tends to be more appealing. In hypermania, you can achieve a lot in your life generally, whereas in mania, the elevated mood is so extreme that normally people get hospitalized. So it's so extreme that there's no real positive consequences of mania. There's also depressive periods, so a lot of people understand what depression is like, but let's look at the diagnostic criteria here. So essentially you feel down most of the day, almost all of the time. There's lack of an interest and pleasure in things. You normally can't eat or want to eat all the time. Sleep is a problem, but you want to spend most of your time trying to sleep anyway, and you're just tired all of the time and feel very worthless. So that is depressive episodes, and typically people will cycle between, like on this mood graph, between periods of highs and periods of lows over a long period of time. And these tend to be quite long periods, like what I've shown on this graph. But people can have a lot shorter periods as well. So the shorter periods sort of go down into 2 main categories. Firstly, you have mixed episodes. In mixed episodes, essentially, is where within the same period of time, you meet both the criteria for mania and depression. So you are so excited and so energetic all the time, but at the same time you feel worthless and you feel a lack of energy as well, and it sort of switches between the 2, but also you experience them both at the same time, which is very difficult to explain, but as you can imagine is incredibly detrimental and damaging to the individual. And I'd say that the most suicidal stages that I've had in my own experience with bipolar have been during these mixed episodes. There's also rapid cycling, where essentially what happens is that you have 4 or more switches in mood within any given year, so the mood changes are a lot faster. and you might be changing every 4 or 5 days or so. Those are essentially the main diagnostic categories within bipolar disorder, and essentially there's 2 diagnoses that can be part of this. So bipolar 1 is where you have full-blown mania, whereas bipolar type 2 is where you only have hypermania. So you don't have that extreme elevated highs, but you tend to be more on the depressive side more of the time. So that's just a general sort of overview of what bipolar disorder is. But also I wanted to discuss early symptoms and triggers, and I'm just going to go into this very briefly here. I go into it in much more depth within my book, but essentially the biggest triggers for bipolar disorder are extremely stressful events and big changes. So big changes is going to be the main one that I'm going to talk about here, because we all know what stress is like in periods of stress, like for example loss, bereavement, etc., loss of a job. But big changes are also a major part of it. So big changes can be going into a new relationship is a positive thing, but it's a big change. A big change could be getting a new job. That's a positive change, but at the same time, that could actually lead to you having a bipolar episode. So I think that realizing and having that self-awareness that changes, even positive changes, you need to then become aware of your symptoms and become aware of your bipolar disorder and notice, are you having early symptoms? So early symptoms of bipolar disorder, normally before you go into the highs, you normally don't feel like you need as much sleep. So you might not need to sleep 5 hours a night as opposed to 8 or something like that near the start, and you still feel a lot of energy. You might feel flights of ideas, or you might be talking faster than usual. And then these are normally indications that you might be going on the high. Whereas when you're going on the low, you might feel fatigued, low self-worth, low motivation, and struggling to find pleasure in things. And that might be an initial early symptom, and then it's important to intervene there and get better treatment before things get worse. So I think that's generally a good overview of that, but now I just wanted to discuss, to finish off, mood graphs, because this is very important, and I've written up my mood over the period of the past few years in order to really show how this is done and how people can become well following treatment and following bipolar disorder. So essentially what happens is, on the x-axis here you write time. So here I've done it via year, through each year, but you can decide to do it whatever time period you want to do it, and then this is for 2013. So this is after a few years of having bipolar disorder. Things were pretty bad at this stage. So during this year I was having, first off I had a sort of hypermanic episode here, then I went into a full-blown manic episode here. So as you can see, beneath this line is more on the depressive side, and above this is more on the manic side. I wasn't really experiencing extremely down mood during this year. It was more on the manic side, because I've got a diagnosis of bipolar 1, and usually people within this diagnosis have more of a manic illness as opposed to a depressive illness. But in 2014, things got very difficult. I had the end of a relationship, which led to a depressive period, followed by a mixed episode. So this is where I was both feeling quite high and feeling quite low, and then I was low again. So things were really unstable at this stage. Then what happened was I started to have treatment. I started to have drug treatment, and I'm a big advocate for drug treatment and medications for bipolar disorder, but I'm also a big advocate for developing self-awareness and allowing time to find the right medications for you. And the psychiatrists that I've had more recently have told me that the medication that I was on at the time probably wasn't the best fit for me. And it took me a long time before I learnt this, but I was already in quite a depressive state before I started the medication. But I went on it, and it was extremely sedative in its effects, and my mood became incredibly low. Then I decided to come off of the medication. mixed episode happened, which was, you know, extreme on both ends. And this was probably the most suicidal period of my whole life, because even if a medication isn't good for you, you need to come off it slowly. I just came off of it straight away, and it was really negative and very damaging for me. So essentially then I found the right medication. Very simple. Like I started to improve in terms of my symptoms overall. Things were still a little bit shaky, you know, up and down, but you know, we sort of tweaked it slightly, and you know, over time I was able to become well. And then now, this is 2016, after a few years of, you know, drug medication as well as, you know, psychological treatment and different things like that, I've gotten to a stage now where my mood is very much up and down in the normal way that human beings experience. We all have ups and downs, but it's in the normal realm. So I'm very happy that I've got to this stage. And the reason why I'm doing this series is because I want to help others to be able to get to this stage too. And I hope that this has informed you a lot about bipolar disorder, what it is, and also how to document your mood, because it's important. It's important to have this awareness, because once you start drug treatments or any treatment, you know, it's important to monitor how you're feeling, because it might be getting worse, and a lot of people give up on drugs or different forms of treatment because of that. But it's not the drugs which is the problem. I mean, it's not drugs in general that's the problem. It's that not all of the same drugs work for each individual. And, you know, one drug which might work really well for me might not work for someone else. So yeah, just develop this self-awareness around what bipolar is. So I'm going to be going into depth into these different ways of how to manage bipolar disorder. Understanding what it is just the first one. But if you want an in-depth look into the whole thing, then I very much recommend my book, Winning the War with Bipolar Disorder. It's you know, it's done very well. It's been respected and put in the library in the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which I'm very pleased that I was able to have that honour, because it's probably the most prestigious psychological library in Europe. But yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that it's been informative. Please subscribe, like, comment, hit the bell, etc., because, you know, I want this content to be able to help more people. But yeah, hope to see you soon, and hope you enjoyed this. Bye.